Campsite Media.
In 2020, at the height of the pandemic, Steve Burns, the former host of the kids show Blues Clues, released a short video on Twitter. Dressed in a striped shirt and hat and his trademark glasses, Burns explained that although it had been a long time since he last saw his friends, he still thought about them. A lot. The clip rapidly went viral because of the unabashed sweetness of the message and also because of the nostalgia factor. Millions of people had grown up with Steve. At a chaotic time, his voice was one of reassurance, of comfort. 5 years after that clip was published, Steve is back again, this time with a new podcast called Alive with Steve Burns. The show, in a lot of ways, is an extension of Blues Clues and the viral video, with a bunch of high-profile guests thrown in. It's intimate, personal. As Steve likes to say, it's one of the first podcasts on Earth that actually, quote, listens back. That's this week on Origin Stories. Welcome back to Origin Stories. Our guest today is Steve Burns, who was, for 8 years, the host of the groundbreaking kids' TV show Blues Clues. After leaving the show, Steve made an album with the Flaming Lips. The first track became the young Sheldon theme. He's also spent more than 25 years as a voiceover actor. Snickers satisfies. Yeah, that's him. In this episode of Origin Stories, we're talking to Steve about his newest project, a podcast called Alive with Steve Burns, which debuted this fall. Steve Burns, welcome to Origin Stories.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I really enjoyed listening to these episodes. So there's 3 out as of the time we're recording it. And I want to talk about all of them. But I want to talk about one thing first, which is when you're talking to Jamie Lee Curtis, who was, I think, the first guest, you talk about this moment during COVID where you recorded a video where you were talking to people. You know, you recorded this message for people. What made you do that?
Well, Blues Clues, which is a basic cable children's television show that I was on in the late 90s, had turned 25 unimaginably. There have been 2 hosts that have followed me, and we were doing some promo stuff, and there was a suggestion that we all kind of do shout-outs for the kids for socials. I mean, you know, social media was just trying to maximize everything as they always do. They were basically like, hey, how can we get like some free commercials out of you guys while you're here? And I was like, well, that sounds like a great idea, but the kids who watch Blues Clues now in 2021 have no idea who I am, right? I'm just some weird old bald man. But so I don't think I want to do that. But what I would love to do is shout out to the homie. You know, I would love to check in with my friend from 25 years ago, who's now probably 30 years old. And there's a couple things that in the moment I feel like I'd like to say. And I didn't write it. I just improv'd it. I think I needed that message at least as much as anyone else did. And 2021 sucked. It was a hard year for everyone. We were really going through it, and it felt to me at the time that the internet was mean. It was a mean place to be, almost as a virtue. It almost felt like in that moment that we were just completely equating being a dick online with being a strong person, and that was being celebrated. Little did I know that 2025 would happen, and that was just the beginning. But at that time, I was alarmed, to be honest, and a little disturbed with all that. And I didn't have any big concept or big idea about what that message would be. It was just those were the feelings I was having, and I just kind of went with that and just said, "Hi, I've missed you. How have you been? You know, I never stopped thinking about you, and boy, this is hard." And it took off in a way that shocked all of us, especially me. I gotta think that it's more about what people brought to that message than it is about the message itself. Because what I did was very unremarkable. I did almost nothing. It points more toward what is missing in our conversation than it does with anything I said in particular. I think a care-driven, respectful conversation is a missing thing on the internet, and that's why it went bananas.
It could also have been that you were talking directly to people, which is what you do in your new
but
show
everybody
live.
does that. But people do that. I mean, that's a trope. Everyone does that, you know.
Not in the same way. I'm really struck listening to the show, and why I rewatched that video right before I got on this call, because I remember when it came out, when you recorded that, it was like, Steve from Blue's Clues brings solace and joy to the world, at a bad time, or like, and it really did go viral in an amazing way. You're right that people talk to the camera all the time, but I don't think they talk to the camera in exactly the same way. And that, I think, might be what people are reacting to. It's like there was a real like an unfeigned intimacy to it.
Well, I guess, I mean, if that's true, that's just because it's the one thing in this world that I have enough practice at to be any good at, right? That was a requisite of my job on Blue's Clues, was that I had to viably create this relationship, this telepresent parasocial, honestly, sort of relationship with a camera. And if that wasn't there, the show kind of didn't work. And all kids TV really talks to the camera. That's really every kids TV show. But what Blue's Clues did that was radical was that we listened to the camera. And that's the only real way I know how to do this thing that we're currently doing right now, is with a gear that includes listening. Again, I think it has as much to do with what people are ready to receive from the internet, from screens, I think is more accurate. I think people are ready to feel legitimately seen and heard by this technology that tends to isolate somehow, even though the promise of it was about community and connecting and all this stuff. I think people want a more human experience and are open and ready for it.
Is there a name for it in your head? I want to try to describe it myself, because I was watching. I have two little kids. We watched an old episode of Blue's Clues. They're probably going to barrel into this interview.
That'd be great.
Later. So I'll explain it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but you can see the same
Good
approach
luck.
You can hear the same approach in the podcast and in this video we're discussing, which is that, like, you talk as if the person is next to you, as if and you are having a conversation. Of course, you cannot hear what the other person is saying. You cannot see their reaction because you are wherever you are, in front of a green screen or in your podcast studio. But you are doing what you just said. You are listening. Like, you are creating the illusion almost of a conversation. What is the name? What is the shorthand in your head for this kind of approach?
I don't have a shorthand for it. I'm listening, and I was kind of trained as an actor, and one of the things that they say is that you actually have to be doing something for people to believe it. And so when I'm doing that, when I say, what do you think? I then listen. I then listen to the silence. And that is deceptively simple. It's actually kind of a worthy practice, this idea of listening deeply to a silence is actually not a bad thing to do, and is kind of a radical act in an internet that is really a fire hose of influence, right? So I don't really have a shorthand for it. What I'm actually doing is listening. It's not a magic trick. It's just that I think I should caveat all this with saying I actually have no idea what I'm doing or why it works. These are just the observations that I make about it. But I think what it does is it creates the conditions for vulnerability on the other side, or at least it creates the opportunity to engage with your human self.
It was
Does that make sense?
astonishing. It makes perfect sense. When you were saying that and like you left the silence, I found myself racing to fill it or to answer out loud,
Yeah.
which is exactly what my 6-year-old did this morning when we were watching. She's like, no,
Hmm.
it's right there. Like, it's right there. There it is
Yeah.
over there, you know? And uh, there are shows that have done that since,
Oh yeah.
a lot of them.
Yeah.
But what you're arguing essentially is that people are bringing their own experience and they're helping create the situation with you because they have in their minds they're filling in the blanks and talking to you, and it's like you give them a space and they fill it with what's in their head.
Yeah. 100%. That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
And so in other words, it's like this, your audience is participating in the creative process in some way.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but yes, I think that is what's going on. I also think that especially in audio, which everyone warned me about, but is actually my favorite thing in the podcast, is leaving awkward silences in an audio format. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm doing that. I think you're right. I think there's an impulse because of conditioning, because of how we are conditioned to ingest and receive entertainment and media, that silence is suspect. Did something happen? Did something go wrong? What's going on? And there is an impulse to fill that silence with something. But if you don't, what happens? And yeah, you bring something of you to that moment.
You haven't been a journalist, but I bet you've been interviewed by a lot of journalists, and the silence thing is one of the first things I learned. I mean, when you're sitting down with someone, like if you just sit there and stare at someone after your question is done, or even after they're done answering, people will race to fill the silence. They will race to fill it, and it's only when you jump in the middle and say, "Oh, maybe this is what you're thinking of," that they immediately shut up and stop talking to you.
Yeah, it's something I need to learn. Interviewing, I don't know how you do it, man. You're obviously very good at it, but you know, the parts of the podcast I feel comfortable with are the ones where I'm like, "Hey, how are you? Do you ever think about dying?" Yeah, me too. Like those parts come very natural to me. But the part where I'm like, "So, Congressman Khanna,
Yeah. Well,
talk to me about wealth disparity," and you know, and that is difficult. You know, it's difficult to shape a conversation, but also allow it to grow organically. It's tricky. It's tricky stuff.
what's the bridge between when you record this video during COVID and when you start to make this podcast? What are you doing in between? Like, what's your full-time gig from 2021 to today before you joined the ranks of podcasting, the podcast world?
After that video, the viral video, the world said we need Blue's Clues for adults, and I said that's not a bad idea, actually. And so what I wanted to do real bad was sort of Ted Lasso meets Fleabag, you know, sort of like this unassailable optimist in a really dark world who is the world's shittiest detective who still needs your help, right? And it's still direct address to the camera. It's like Columbo, sort of. But he's talking to you and he needs your help figuring out not only, you know, arson and murders and stuff, but also his life, you know, which is a proxy for yours. And I really thought that could have been a cool show, but unsurprisingly, no one made that show. So I was kind of ideating like, oh, what would that look like? In terms of career stuff, what I was doing a lot of public speaking. You know, I was talking a lot to universities and things, and all of that very quickly became very vulnerable, which surprised me. You know, that viral video has been a real gift to me. It's been a huge gift to me because it kind of cracked me open in a way that I really hadn't been before. And it allowed me to kind of put my arm around Steve, the character Steve, in a way that had been difficult for me before. And all of a sudden I found myself standing at Mizzou, just kind of talking about how I was severely clinically depressed the entire time I was on children's television, and how that totally messed me up because everyone thought I was dead for 20 years. And I was just sort of accessing these parts of myself that were honest in a way that required bravery, frankly, that I didn't know I had. And so I was dealing with that stuff. It did feel like a remarkable opportunity, an accidental, remarkable opportunity where I could, where people were listening to what I was saying when I said it that way through the camera and with those silences. It seemed that I had somehow had some kind of special access to a generation and a half of people and what could be done with that.
Did you think podcast first, Steve, or did someone approach you about doing a podcast?
Podcast was always in my mind, but I was like, man, everybody has a podcast. There are simply too many podcasts. And I wanted the visual element because I felt that that's where my little power is in the relation to the camera. And so I didn't really think of it as a podcast, to be honest. I thought of it as like a low budget public access cable show from the 90s, and that's still the way I see it, where we strip the audio. And, but if I'm being really transparent, the audio portion is at least as exciting to me. The radio theater of it. I'm trying to do lots of I'm making tea in every episode just so you can hear that happening. So you can hear the ripping open of a tea bag. And I go outside at the end of every episode so you can hear the birds and the leaves and I just want it to be as immersive as it can be.
I want to describe the format, which is a really interesting format. At the beginning, you are doing a version of adult Blue's Clues where you're sort of inviting somebody into your house and you're spitballing a little bit, talking about the theme that you're going to address, making tea, and then the guest comes in. But it's foregrounded by this really lovely, sort of cozy is the word that comes to mind when I was listening to it. It's like, hanging out with a friend. That format, did you have that at the beginning? Did you know that I want to do an interview, but I also need to welcome people in this way into this space?
Actually, now that I'm remembering it, the podcast format came from a conversation that I was having from a producer of late night television. And we were just sort of talking about late night and what the conventions of late night are. And I realized, the conventions of late night TV are actually remarkably similar to the conventions of children's television, in that there's always an invitational aspect to it. Hi, welcome to this space that you've anticipated and is always the same. I will be your guide. I exist here, and you've come to my space. And now you're anticipating every single segment. Now you're anticipating every single moment. And that is part of the fun. You know that I'm going to do a monologue now. And then there's going to be a comedy bit, and then a guest, then another comedy bit, then another guest. And at the end, it's going to be a big celebration with music. Right. And I remember, I think I kind of pitched in the room, like, what if there was a podcast that did that backwards? Like where it's, hi, come on in. And I'm all stressed out about something. And this is like, aren't you stressed out about this? I'm stressed out about it, blah, 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 blah. And the podcast deliberately gets slower and more relaxed as it goes until the end is really just a reflective, kind of a bong rip before you go to bed kind of thing, That's crudely where I started, was kind of a late night show. Remember when Colbert did it during the pandemic, and he was just like, hey, I'm just here in this little room It's like, there's something there, like that would work. Like you could do a whole thing that way. So it is deliberately Blue's Clues. It's deliberately Fred Rogers. I'm going to wear this hat and a pair of glasses in every single one for that sweater kind of through line. And the T will be there, and there are deliberate conventions and contours that are anchor points that you will anticipate and stuff. And that's very much an homage and an echo to the kids' TV thing, but in a way that, again, like I said before, just in a way that lets you feel like, oh, I'm going to speak to you now as an adult, but from a place of joy from your childhood, and that just kind of gets us in a specific posture that I think allows for a certain depth of conversation.
How baked were the ingredients of the show before you talked to? So Lemonada is the distributor and producer of this show. Did you go through additional conversations with the folks at Lemonada? Were you thinking about what's available in the podcast market, where this could fit, how the format might change?
I shot 3 episodes on my own before I even talked to Lemonada, because I was like, man, this is a zero barrier world. Come on now, let's all go. Let's make it. Let's make this a public access cable show. But then I actually talked to a bunch of producers about what it is to make a podcast. And then I was like, I need a partner. And we talked to a bunch of people, but I loved Lemonada. Like they got it. They got what I was trying to do. But it was fully baked. It was fully baked.
Those 3 episodes are the ones that are out now? No, right?
No. The death episode was where I started because I knew I wanted the show to be called Alive, and I wanted to talk about how I kind of wasn't for a while, and then we did an episode about sex, and then we did an episode about taxes. I wanted to start death, sex, and taxes is where I wanted to start, So we shot those 3. And showed, and I think we only really produced the death episode, but I had enough for a substantial teaser for the other 2.
Could you have seen a world in which you did? I understand you made the decision just in terms of the logistics to go with a distribution partner, but what would it have looked like to just put these out into the world in 2025 and just say, "Hey, I'm Steve. I'm back with my new show"?
I think that also might have worked. There's something about that people want. We're deliberately using consumer, prosumer gear, half of it shot with iPhone. I want it to look like a FaceTime. I think people want a more real human experience from this technology. And I think that at least what we're trying to do is benefiting from low production value. I think the idea that, hey, somebody made this in their basement and threw it on YouTube is a feature, not a bug. Now, depending on what it is, I think it's bifurcated now, right? It's either Iron Man 15 that costs $275 million, or it's something that you baked in your own oven and put on the internet. I think
so too.
Yeah,
I really do. I mean, I also think we're dealing with this. The best description I've still heard of why podcasting will endure is, this is maybe 5 years ago, Bill Simmons, the sports guy, was talking about AirPods, Apple AirPods. And he was like, this is the difference maker. It's like we're learning as a society to walk around everywhere we go with these things in our ears and to just do all the things we normally do, listening to stuff. But you are right that a lot of what we're listening to is abrasive or not healthy or not immersive in an interesting way, whereas you are consciously making a decision, especially at the beginning of this show, to like really slow it down for people, right? It's like, this is not going to, from the second you turn on Alive that it's not going to be what you're used to hearing. It is crazy how much we get bombarded, isn't it? I mean, listening to you talk about this, I'm sort of like taking myself to task, because I'm one of those people who just just do everything with headphones in now.
Oh my God, I'm so bad, dude. And I live up here on this mountain, and I'm technically off grid, and I'm outside a lot. I got stuff to do outside all the time, and I got my Apple headphones on, and I'm just like mainlining information, and it's not good.
But I do think there's something that we clearly lose as we get older of being in touch with small moments of fascination or interest. That's like, again, watching my kid watch Blue's Clues this morning, I was
Sure.
like, oh, she's just like, there's no guile. There's no, like, here's a better way of describing it. She has not learned to disguise herself from the world.
That is a better way of describing. That's a great way of describing it. Yeah.
which
We
is
lose
what we
that, right? We lose that. We're born with it for sure. We're born with wonder the same way we're born with a grasping instinct because it is necessary for survival. I always say, we did not learn to wonder. We wondered to learn. That's how that actually works. And we unlearn it with school. School unlearns it. We learn to value certainty for other reasons, but kids still have it, and there is an aspect of that I think is part of the wisdom that being around kids just teaches you.
You can relearn it. I mean, I would argue
I think
that
so.
listening to some of the episodes of your show, if someone is really putting themselves in that headspace, they could relearn it. But here, this brings up something I'm curious about. This mix of these first 3 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
The Jamie Lee Curtis one was a really fun conversation, and then you've got A Politician, which is a really different kind of conversation. So how do you choose this mix? Is it like, are you thinking you have to be thinking maybe a little commercially, like I want a mix of guests in the early episodes in some way?
Well, yeah, I mean the big giant, resplendent celebrity splashy interview. This is a business, and those are important. And if we're gonna do those, I want those to be as human as possible. And I've known Jamie for a long time, and she is even more of a badass than you think she is. She is a loud heart. And there's something indomitable and fearless and so deeply human about how she chooses to show up as a giant famous person that I think is instructive. And if she's listening to this, she's going to be like, Steve Burns, shut up. She's going to hate it. Right. But I do think it is. And she's a perfect example of a celebrity that I would want to interview. And that's how, I'm choosing. We're a subject-driven podcast, right? I'm better served speaking on a big subject than I am to a big person, I think. I think my favorite interview I've done so far, and it won't be out for a while, but it was with a millennial neurodivergent neuroscientist speaking about autism, mostly, but in neurodiversity. Her name's Desi Jones. She was brilliant, and I just had a wonderful, wonderful conversation. That felt dialed in to me more so probably than, if I interviewed, Ben Affleck about something, which I would, I guess, but you see what I'm saying.
How many interviews or how many episodes in this first season?
24, and then there's a bunch of premium content. I have this notion, and I don't know if it's valid, but I have this notion that all of them will Venn diagram, and we will take information that we learned and scaffold them across the season. That's a very Blue's Clues idea, by the way. That comes from, the kind of hardcore child development world that I happened to be in for a while. But, we're talking about death with Julie McFadden, then I'm going to talk to someone about near-death experiences, and then I'm going to talk to someone about end-of-life planning, and then I'm going to talk to my mom about that stuff. And we're talking I talked to Bill Nye about like critical thinking and where do we go wrong, and why does why do half the people who grew up watching our shows believe that there are lizard people in the world, and we kind of isolated the idea that the scientific process should be fun and should be something that you do. So I'm going to talk to Adam Savage from Mythbusters about like wonder and like, you know, how can we make that methodology an actual practice in our lives. And so you see, like I'm trying to, I hope that thematically these things all dovetail and intersect, but maybe that's not the way podcasts work. I don't know.
I think they probably are, but then there's also there's you as connective tissue. So of course they're going to scaffold together, right? Because there's that the center of that Venn diagram are the things that you're interested in too, and that you feel passionately about.
Well, and I'm also trying to make the podcast about you, you know, as much as possible. Like, no, you are the celebrity guest in every episode. And so there is some role playing where, you know, where I talk about debt, for example. I'm more sort of becoming your avatar, like a millennial who's utterly besotted with absurd amounts of debt. So I'll sort of like take on the anxiety of the audience for certain episodes to start the conversation that way.
Did you have to practice with interviewing? Did it get easier as you recorded more of them?
No, I don't know what I'm doing. What I did was I watched like 40 hours of Dick Cavett, and then I realized that was not useful to this form in any way, and that I'd probably be better off taking some improv classes and understanding what journalism is, right? It seems like it's improvisational journalism, if it's anything. But I'm still flailing around in a sea of fear.
It doesn't sound like you're flailing around when you listen to the interviews, but I do think you're onto something with the improv. I always do go and listen to stuff before, and I read what he wrote, but it's really hard to make a game plan to talk to someone that you haven't met before, because there's something happening that's chemistry or situationally dependent, as opposed to, 10 questions that I must get through in a given interview.
Do you do that? Do you write 10 questions that you must get through? Because I keep doing that, and it keeps being a problem.
Yeah, they never work. It never works. It never works. I know where I want to start, like, usually, and I know a few things that I'm really curious about.
Well, I go out of my way in the beginning to kind of make a convention out of, I'm asking you a question at the top of the show, and this is what we're going to wonder about, and this is how I'm refining the question, and yeah, let's talk about this. And then the interview really wants to reflect that, right? So what I'm trying to do now is shoot the interview first and then shoot the beginning and end after, and reverse engineer the beginning to what the interview was, and just kind of let it be kind of what it is. I have a gear where I will do 600 takes of something, and it can never be done, and it can never be right. And I have to sort of protect this podcast from that side of myself, because there's no time to be that way. And I don't know that it would be served by dysfunctional perfectionism anyway.
How will you judge success for this, Steve, with the podcast? I mean, not just downloads.
I think I would judge success from this if people are really responding to the listening of it, if people feel heard by it, in a way that is different from the other media that they are ingesting. I feel like that would be special. I think it would be a success if people come back to the podcast with an expectation of examining their lives in a way that is joyful, and I think it would be a success if I somehow made good use of the connection that has somehow been indelible over 30 years.
Steve, thanks so much for doing this.
Hey, man, thank you. This was a lot of fun. And good luck to you. I can't wait to hear the rest of your pod.